And we are back with another episode of the Chips Podcast. Tyler Melito joined, as always, by my good friend, and hopefully your friend as well, Ryan Amick. Ryan, how are you doing?
I'm not doing too great. Unfortunately, I was forced to go home because I contracted the coronavirus a couple days ago. So I'm back at home. In my original setting that we had when we were doing Zoom calls back in the summer, I'm getting strong deja vu right now. It feels like we're just back in the summer doing these Chips podcasts over Zoom like that. But hey, at least we're keeping it going. Hopefully you're safe and COVID free. I see you're home now.
Yes, I am COVID free. Got my test back yesterday, so that's a plus.
That's always good.
Does feel like the summer, except it's a lot colder. So
Yeah.
it's interesting.
It's pretty sunny out today, though. It's
a nice day.
Skies.
Yeah.
You can barely tell it's not winter. It is.
Besides, no leaves on the trees at all.
Yeah.
But enough about that, because Ryan, today is a big day. If you're watching on Wednesday, November 18th, when we're recording it, it is NBA draft night, a day that was supposed to be back in June, but given the coronavirus pandemic and the season not actually ending until middle of October, has been pushed to today. So right now, Ryan and I are going to be doing a little mock draft, first 10 picks of this NBA draft. We're not making any trades. We're going based off what it currently is in terms of the standings, in terms of the draft order, making our picks, giving our explanations. And if any trades break in the middle of this podcast recording, I am going to be very pissed. But Ryan, that sound good?
Yes, absolutely. Even though this year there might be a lot of trades in this draft. All three of the top three picks in this draft, the Timberwolves at number 1, Warriors at number 2, and Hornets at number 3, they've all expressed trying to trade down at some point. So I definitely do think there will be trades in this draft, as do you, I assume. But like you said, we can't account for them. We can't predict that. It'd be kind of foolish to try to do so. So we're just going to go as is. And hopefully not too many trades go off. So our mock drafts are somewhat realistic.
Somewhat realistic indeed. But anyway, let's get right to it. The first overall pick goes to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Wow, I can't speak. Ryan, I'll let you start. Who do you have the Timberwolves taking?
So I'm kind of almost going to backtrack on what I just said. I think the Timberwolves stay put and actually draft a player and want to keep their pick and don't draft a player to try to trade them, I think Anthony Edwards, out of all the prospects, makes the most sense for the Timberwolves, because in this draft, there really is no consensus number 1 like there have been in years past, especially last year. That was one of the most clear number 1s ever. Everyone knew Zion was going number 1 overall to the Pelicans. This year, the Timberwolves don't have that assurance. They don't know exactly who the real top prospect in the draft is. There's really 3 prospects who are at the top of the draft, but they have flaws in their own rights. And I'm talking about Anthony Edwards, who I think the Timberwolves will draft, LaMelo Ball, and James Wiseman. All 3 could go anywhere in the top 3 in this draft. But I think, as I said, I think the Timberwolves would draft Anthony Edwards if they're trying to keep the pick. But I really don't think the Timberwolves are going to keep this pick no matter what they do. I think what their goal is they're going to draft number 1 overall. I don't think they'll trade their pick before they draft, but I think they might draft a player who they intend to trade to a team. And if that is the case, I'm kind of backtracking on what we said, no trades, but I think LaMelo is going to go number 1 overall in this draft. Not if the Timberwolves pick him. I don't think LaMelo really fits well with the Timberwolves, especially in that backcourt with D'Lo. He's a great ball handler, bad defender. That's what LaMelo is. So you don't really need another one of that if you're the Timberwolves. So I don't think LaMelo fits with the Timberwolves. But what I personally think is the Timberwolves will draft LaMelo with the intention to trade him to maybe the Pistons or the Knicks or any team that could use a star guy like LaMelo on their team. But Tyler, that was kind of a long-winded answer. Gave a couple prospects. I think LaMelo is going number 1 overall to whatever team ends up getting him. What do you think is going to happen?
So just to be clear, if the Minnesota Timberwolves keep the pick, you're going to go with Anthony Edwards out of Georgia, right?
Yeah. In this mock draft, I don't have them picking him. So I have them picking LaMelo with the intention to trade him. But if they were to just keep their pick, I would say Anthony Edwards.
Anthony Edwards, James Wiseman, and LaMelo Ball, it's been a kind of shuffling. I don't think the Timberwolves are going to go James Wiseman simply because they have Karl Anthony Towns at center and they can't play 2. It just make no sense. We saw it with the Philadelphia 76ers with Al Horford and Joel Embiid. It simply did not work. I actually think the Timberwolves are not going to trade this pick at all because, frankly, what are they going to get of value? So I have them taking LaMelo Ball with the intention of keeping him. I think the Timberwolves, they need a star. LaMelo Ball has been a star for as long as his for for a very long time right now, since he was
like
maybe 14 years old. Yeah. When he dropped 92 points in a high school game. I know they traded for D'Angelo Russell at the deadline last year, but I view him as more of a shooting guard, not so much of a traditional point guard. LaMelo is more of that traditional point guard where he could run the offense very well and efficiently. Is a marvelous passer. I mean, insanely good at facilitating. And I think that will allow for D'Lo to get set up for open threes, Karl-Anthony Towns to get set up for easy layups in the paint and maybe a couple of kick out threes as well, because Karl-Anthony Towns has been doing that as well. Pick and roll with Cat and D'Lo, that would be a Cat and LaMelo would be awesome. And also, I know LaMelo, the defensive things you mentioned, that's definitely a concern, but I think that will come. The shooting touch will come as he gets more into the NBA game. I think he's got more. I think he now knows more than what Lonzo did a couple years earlier. Obviously, Lonzo Ball is LaMelo Ball's older brother. And I think similar to Lonzo, LaMelo's going to have to add some form of muscle, which will come. He's only 19 years old, mind you. He's younger than us. So the size is going to come. He's 6'7" point guard. It's insane. He can create and facilitate in both the full court and half court settings. I think the Timberwolves will be happy to take LaMelo Ball and keep him as a centerpiece for their long term with D'Lo and Karl-Anthony Towns.
I understand what you're saying there. And I think LaMelo Ball could easily be the best player in this draft, could go number one.
The most talented by far.
In terms of just talent and who should go number one overall, regardless of team, I think LaMelo fits there, which is why in my mock draft, I have him going number one overall, no matter who ends up picking him. The one problem with him on the Timberwolves, though, you were mentioning him in a pick and roll with Cat would be great, but they just got D'Lo to do that. D'Lo Cat pick and roll would be great. I mean, adding LaMelo wouldn't hurt it, but that defensive backcourt would easily be the worst in the league. And also, one of the things for the Timberwolves, they've had issues in the past with just mentality. I mean, we saw with Andrew Wiggins, who they got rid of because of that issue. Cat was getting some blame, especially during the time when Jimmy Butler was on the team. He was really the only guy on that team who had a winning mentality. And we see now with the Heat, once he got his own team, he put his winning mentality to the test and got to the finals. So then the Timberwolves, guys like Andrew Wiggins and Karl-Anthony Towns got targeted as maybe they don't have it up here. They're not mentally ready in the NBA. And that's what guys like LaMelo and Anthony Edwards have concerns with as well. LaMelo, when he doesn't have the ball, he just like stands out there. There's been really big issues, especially on defense, of his lack of engagement, lack of energy, just falling asleep on defense. And then offensively, when he doesn't have the ball, has a tendency to just stand there and not add much to the offensive game. So that could be an issue with D'Lo maybe holding the ball a lot as one of the primary ball handlers on that team. What is LaMelo going to do when he doesn't have the ball? Is he just going to stand in the corner and do nothing like he's been shown to do in sometimes when he doesn't have the ball? I mean, that's the only real concern I have for LaMelo going to the Timberwolves. And also just the Timberwolves pick in general is definitely the most highly contested pick in this draft. And there's a lot of uncertainty around it for sure.
All I will say is before we move on to number two, is if CP3 and James Harden and Russell Westbrook can figure out how to deal with one basketball and play together, I think LaMelo Ball and D'Angelo Russell can. But moving ahead to pick number two, it's the Golden State Warriors. Who would have thought that they would have had this high of a pick after making it to the NBA Finals? Injuries riddled this team all season long. Klay Thompson with the torn ACL, Draymond Green in and out of the lineup, Steph Curry broken hand for most of the year. They lucked into the number two overall pick. So who do you think they are going to take?
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous they have this pick. I mean, you look at
embarrassment of riches.
A little fan bias here. The Knicks have been disgustingly awful for years and haven't had a top two picks since Patrick Ewing, whereas the Warriors 3 championships this decade and they get a number two pick. That aside, that was not your question. I think that the Warriors will obviously draft James Wiseman with the number 2 overall pick. It's really the only thing that makes sense for the Warriors moving forward. Their biggest by far hole on this roster is at the center position, and it's really been that way their entire dynasty. They've never really had a great center holding down the paint and staying with the team throughout their dynasty run. They went transition from Andrew Bogut, Kevon Looney, put Draymond Green at center sometimes in small ball lineups. I mean, they've never had a real consistent big man. And James Wiseman is exactly that. He's perfect for this offense, this Warriors offense as well, because he's a great rim runner, great screener. He's 7'1", has a 7'6" wingspan, 230. He's huge. He's big. He can run to the paint. He's a great rebounder. Got 10 rebounds in college. Even though he only played a couple games at Memphis, he had great numbers, putting up and averaging double-doubles and 3 blocks a game. So he's a great rim protector as well, which is something they're missing on the Warriors' defensive side. So James Wiseman makes perfect sense for both sides of the ball for the Warriors. They could definitely look to trade this pick like the Timberwolves. They've been talking about maybe moving him, the number 2 pick, and maybe Andrew Wiggins for something like that. But if they do stay at the number 2 pick, I think James Wiseman fits perfectly for the Warriors.
Yeah, and I think the Warriors, they might be saying that they want to trade the number 2 pick, but I think they need to think the future here. That's why I don't have him going James Wiseman. I have him going Anthony Edwards out of Georgia. I mean, it makes the most sense. Sure, they're in win now mode with Steph, Clay, and Draymond all coming back and healthy. But Edwards, he is a awesome scorer. And they already have Andrew Wiggins, Eric Pascal, some young pieces that really got a chance to develop during this year of, I guess, turmoil, you could call it, for the Warriors, depending on how you define turmoil. Anthony Edwards, I think, could be a nice building block for the future. And the thing with Wiseman, why I don't think he'd be the greatest of fits with Golden State, is because they have traditionally played small ball. They were the real inventors or enforcers of small ball during this decade of the 2010s. I think Edwards would fit really nicely in there. You have Steph at the 1, Edwards at the 2, Clay at the 3, Draymond at the 5, and whoever you want at the 4, maybe Wiggins, who knows. And Edwards, he could be the guard of the future once Steph and Clay move on, because they're both entering the latter half of their career, however long that may be. Who knows how Clay's knee holds up with the injury? He might be coming back 100%, but you never know with knee injuries. It's just a thing like that. Steph Curry, obviously he's still an immense talent, but when you have a talent like Anthony Edwards at the guard position that can really set you up for the next stretch of a Warriors dynasty, I think the Warriors and their management has to take in. I think Edwards, he also get to learn against under 2 of the greatest guards in NBA history in Thompson and Clay. Thompson and Curry. So I think it's a no-brainer that they take Edwards if he's there.
One thing I do want to point out, though, I was watching First Take this morning, and they actually had Joe Lacob, the Warriors CEO, on for a quick interview. And when they were asking him what they might be looking for in tonight's draft, they did mention possibly trading the pick. But then they also mentioned how they really want someone who's big and physical, because they mentioned teams like the Lakers who had really good success this year because they had a bunch of really big, strong centers who defended the paint. They could rotate all 3 of them out at once. They kind of need someone to combat that.
You think James Wiseman can do that? 235 pounds? The guy's a freaking string bean.
James Wiseman's not a string. James Wiseman is a
He's 7'1", 235. All right. So not in terms of that, but when you look at his frame, he definitely needs to fill out. And Anthony Davis, I'm Googling right now, is 253 pounds. Dwight Howard,
he's not going to be on
265
from the start. I'm just saying they need someone to kind of just mirror his body if they want to in a playoff series against the Lakers. Going against a small ball lineup like that, I just don't think that's going to work, especially because their small ball lineup worked when they had Kevin Durant, not Andrew Wiggins. That's a big difference in small forward right there. I don't think small ball lineup's the way to go, especially with teams like the Lakers with a bunch of bigs who are hard to defend, and that's a big reason why they won the title. So James Wiseman also, a lot of people have concerns about him because he's not exactly ready. He's very raw. He barely played last year for Memphis. There's
played
still
3
a lot
games
unknown for him. I think putting him in the Warriors where he's like the 4th or 5th option is perfect for him. All he has to focus on is getting Steph and Clay's rebounds and giving them screens, kind of like what Draymond does for them. Either way, there is some uncertainty for sure, but I think it makes more sense for them to go Wiseman.
I mean, like we said, Wiseman, Ball, and Edwards are the top 3 consensus. It's just a matter of what's the team's fancy that ends up taking them. Let's move to number 3, the Charlotte Hornets, who frankly, they need a lot of help. So Ryan, who are you going to send to them? I think I know who it's going to be. It's the last of the 3.
Yeah, like you said, there's really 3 players. No matter what the order is, they're most likely going to go in the top 3. The Hornets they need best player available. They don't need to focus on position or anything like that. They just need to get someone that will help turn this mediocre franchise around. And obviously, I think Anthony Edwards works perfectly for that. For the biggest reason being that the Hornets offense was putrid last year. They were last in points per game in the entire NBA, had very big issues moving ball around, only had one real playmaker in Devontae Graham and one real offensive weapon in the backcourt in Devontae Graham. So adding Anthony Edwards' offensive versatility to that backcourt, pairing it with Devontae Graham, who could get him open with his playmaking And so Devontae Graham isn't the main source of offense on this team because no team with Devontae Graham as the number one is going to be a playoff team. But having him as a sidekick to an Anthony Edwards, who put up pretty good numbers at Georgia, 19 points a game, 5 rebounds. What NBA scouts really like about him, though, is his ability to create his own shot. He's got a really good step back he's been working on. His shooting numbers weren't great. He shot sub 30% from three in college, but his free throw numbers are there. And that's usually more of a telling sign that someone has a good jumper is when their free throw numbers are up. Because college, the three-point line is different. Can't really rely too heavily on three-point percentages in college. But free throw percentage and just shot form really gives a telling tale of how someone's shot is. Anthony Edwards looks like he has a great shot. He's a big, strong guy who's really tough to finishing at the rim. So offensively, he's got all the tools there. It's more of a mental thing, like I said, with LaMelo. Sometimes he seems disengaged. He doesn't seem like he's fully committed, and that's a big issue for some teams, especially during interviews where they were talking to him. They were kind of turned off with Edwards based on his attitude and stuff like that. So that's always an issue. That's why maybe his talent says number one overall pick, but maybe he falls to number 3 because of that. But either way, I think the Hornets would be glad to take Edwards, Ball, or even Wiseman, whoever falls to them at number 3 if they don't end up trading their pick. So, yeah, I think Edwards would really be a big boost to this Hornets offense and could get the ball rolling in their rebuilding process, which has been year what at this point? It seems like it's been forever.
Ever since they took Kemba Walker. I think Edwards would work. I think the one question would be, what do they do with Terry Rozier? Because they paid him so much money, and then now with the emergence of Devontae Graham, I don't know if they would rotate all 3 of them or try to trade Scary Terry, but who knows? I have James Wiseman going to Charlotte. I think the Hornets, they got nice young pieces in Rozier, Devontae Graham, Miles Bridges, and PJ Washington, who play the 1 through 4 positions. Wiseman clearly is a center, can fill that spot. It might be the missing piece for them to complete this somewhat of a rebuild, and they have their young core. Now it's just a matter of winning. Like I said, the Hornets need a lot. Wiseman, he's a beast in the middle, an athletic freak, given his size. He can do it on both ends as a rim protector and a finisher. I will say, though, the one thing I heard this morning was Michael Jordan gave LaMelo Ball kind of like a blessing almost, that if he's there, he'll take him. So that's something to keep an eye out for. But I think James Wiseman would be the best fit for this Charlotte Hornets team, given what will happen, what I predict will happen with picks 1 and 2, LaMelo and Anthony Edwards. Wiseman to the Hornets just makes it's 100% makes sense for me.
Yeah, and like you said, Michael Jordan is perfectly right with that reasoning. If LaMelo Ball is there, obviously you take him. Sure, one of the most, untouchable pieces on this Hornets team is probably the point guard position with Devontae Graham. He's been really proven to be the one draft pick that's really developed well in this system. So putting the point guard wouldn't be the best in terms of that, but like we said, you need the best player available. Right. If LaMelo Ball is there, you figure it out with him, Devontae Graham. You most likely put Graham as a shooting guard in terms of his role, but with size, LaMelo being 6'7", you won't put him on point guards. You put him more on like shooting guards or threes even because of his size.
Depending on
either
the
way,
team.
Yeah, it's just if you're the Hornets, draft one of those 3 guys if you can. And you can because you're the 3rd pick. So
exactly.
One of them will fall to you.
In theory. I think the Hornets, they're the most likely to trade out of the 3 of these teams. I've just heard a lot of rumors. There's a rumor of Russell Westbrook possibly being traded to Charlotte, which I don't think will happen, but I think they're the most likely to trade out. But let's move ahead to the Chicago Bulls at pick number 4. This is where people are saying the draft is going to start. We know the 1, 2, and 3 will most likely be Wiseman, Ball, and Edwards, barring something crazy. So pick number 4, Chicago Bulls, Ryan, who do you have? They now have a new coach. They fired Jim Boylan. So who do you think they're going to take?
I have him picking Denny Avdija. I think he's definitely going to go in the top 5 at some point. I think he fits well with the Cavs at the next pick as well if he ends up falling to them. But I think if you're the Bulls, you need some small forward help, and you really need playmaking because Kobe White and Zach LaVine aren't the best playmakers on this team. So putting Denny at the small forward position, hoping to create offense for them could be a really big help. Also, he's shown some promise defensively. He is kind of skinny, but he's got a high IQ. He's smart in that sense. He's got good footwork. He has the ability to be a decent NBA defender. It's really a lot of teams are in love with his playmaking ability and his ability to create his own offense. The one issue for me personally is his shooting. He had some very low numbers, and they're pretty concerning, especially because he was international as well. I mean, he had 52% from the free throw line. That's really, really discouraging. That's if you can't shoot in the NBA, that's a really big problem, especially at the wing position. You're going to be spread out on the perimeter for the majority of it. So if you're not hitting those threes, you're not helping this offense run. But I think his playmaking will just fit perfectly at the position that they need the most and could be one of the building blocks they use to turn around this team.
Yeah, I also have Deni Avdija, so I'm not going to hammer it too much here. But Coby White and Zach LaVine look to be the backcourt of the future in Chicago. Lauri Markkanen and Wendell Carter in the front court probably were not used to their best ability under Jim Boylen. I mean, that's not probably, that is definitely.
No one used to their best ability under
exactly.
Jim Boylen.
So that leaves Otto Porter, the current small forward for this team, who is talented, but I don't think he's part of the long-term piece, at least as a starter for the Chicago Bulls. So that's where Avdija fits in. Like you mentioned, not a great shooter, but top-rated small forward in this class who can play both the 3 and the 4 given his size. And that's the one thing. Another thing is he can play without the ball. He doesn't need it in his hand. So that allows Zach LaVine and Coby White to do their things with the ball, bring it up the court and run in the offense. Avdija can just come off and make a play for himself. And the other thing is 100 games plus of professional basketball experience. I mean, we saw it with Luka Doncic. I'm not saying that Avdija is Luka Doncic, but that professional experience can definitely help a young guy. Avdija, only 19 years old, can really make a splash for Chicago Bulls. I mean, once again, another team who I think I really don't know what their plan is, but I think they're one young piece away from having their core and now just winning. So I think Avdija is that one remaining piece.
I agree with you there.
Moving ahead to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Obviously, they've not been the same since LeBron James left. They've taken point guards in their last 2 drafts with Colin Sexton and Darius Garland. So who do you have them taking here in 2020, Ryan?
Yeah, it's tough for them because there are some good point guards still on the board. Killian Hayes, of course, out of Australia.
You wouldn't think they'd take another point guard.
No, that's what I'm going towards. Tyrese Halliburton, great point guard out of Iowa State, but you're not drafting another point guard because not only did they draft 2 point guards in the first round, they drafted 2 point guards last year. So they really have 3 young point guards on this team who they're still waiting on to see who will emerge as the lead point guard of the 3. None of them really have a head in this race so far. Maybe Colin Sexton. He averaged almost 20 points for the Cavs last year, so he had a decent season. But really, they need to focus more on their front court, which is where their biggest issues are. Right now, they have Kevin Love, who they've been trying to trade for a while. Kevin Love obviously does not want to be in Cleveland anymore. And then they have Andre Drummond, who did pick up his player option for this lone year. But I don't think he'll be on this team past this year, which is why I think the Cavs go with a big in Onyeka Okongwu out of USC. They really struggle defensively, and he is one of the best defenders in this draft. He has a lot of shades of a Bam Adebayo type. He's a little undersized for a big, but defensively, he gets it done. He's smart. He also is very polished in the post and in his offensive game. So two-way player. He's a little bit raw right now, which is why I think it's perfect for him to sit behind Andre Drummond for a year. Even Kevin Love can give him some pointers while he's in a bench role his first season. Then next season, he turns into that Bam Adebayo role where Hassan Whiteside was the starter when he was on the Heat. Then he got got traded, and Bam was the go-to guy. I think a similar situation could play out for the Cavs, where once Drummond's deal is done, they let him walk, and Okongwu is the starter for the future. He got to sit under Andre Drummond, who's a great presence, one of the best rebounders ever. He can learn how to be even better rebounder under him. I think this is a great situation for Okongwu, and also I think he's one of the best available as well. And if you're the Cavs, again, you're a really bad franchise. No position is really secure. Anyone with talent should be picked, and I think Okongwu is a talent fit, is a position fit, and makes the most sense for the Cavs.
I just had to check to make sure I didn't send you my notes because I also have the Cavs going with Onyeka Okongwu. I mean, and you mentioned
at least our first 3 picks were mixed up, and those were the ones expected to be the same.
Right.
So
somewhat different. Like you mentioned, Kevin Love and Andre Drummond are not the long-term pieces. The one thing of Okongwu is that he did fracture a toe in his left foot. It's not a major fracture. It's only going to be out 1 to 3 weeks, so nothing crazy. But he is the best player available, and I think the Cavs can really use him. They're not near getting back to where they were with LeBron James or even during the time with Kyrie Irving before LeBron James came back. But I think Okongwu could be a nice piece to run the pick and roll. Very good athletically, very good feet, and could run the pick and roll with both their young guards and Sexton and Darius Garland. Strong finisher around the rim as well. And like you mentioned, he'll get the opportunity to learn behind at least Drummond for a part of the season. Since Drummond opted into his player option, he's going to make $28 some odd million for a guy who is basically rendered obsolete in today's NBA. It's insane, but great opportunity for Okongwu to learn behind two veterans in Love and Drummond. I think it's a perfect fit for Cleveland, especially for their future.
I agree with you as well. Moving on to the 6th pick now. This was one of the more interesting teams because they can go in a few different directions here. Tyler, I want to hear first, though, because I've been going first now. I want to hear you. I want to see, do you have the pick I'm going with? Because I think I might have a little thing different here.
I think you might. I have the Atlanta Hawks going with Isaac Okoro out of Auburn. Trae Young is the star, the number one on this team without question, star point guard there's no doubt about it. John Collins and Kevin Huerter are two solid co-stars for Trae Young. Who knows what the future is with Clint Capella, but with the two top centers off the board, I would say it's time to just get the best small forward available, and Okoro can compete with DeAndre Hunter, who I wasn't very high on to begin last year. DeAndre Hunter, I'm not big on him. I would say that. I think Okoro could beat him out. He's not the greatest of scorers by any stretch, but doesn't have to, because given the rest of Atlanta's roster with Trae Young, who's going to be dominating the ball, dominating the scoring for this team. He averaged, I think, was it 30 points per game last season, Trae Young did, or was it just under? I don't remember.
It was just under, but either way, I mean, he was obviously the biggest offensive point of this team.
Exactly. Promising basketball IQ, Okoro has, given his very good size, 6'6", 225. Can be one of those guys that simply does everything outside of scoring, from facilitating to rebounding to defending to making those hustle plays. I think the Hawks would get a really nice second piece, because I don't think John Collins' future is not going to be long-term with Atlanta. I think they move on from him sooner rather than later. Yeah. I don't think it'll be tonight. Maybe it might be next year they move on from him, because I don't think he's necessarily blossomed into a solid co-partner with Trae Young. He's very athletic, very bouncy, very talented, but given the style that Trae Young plays, I think he needs a more solid co-star, and I think Okoro could definitely be that.
That's interesting for sure. I, at some point, had Okoro going here. I think I might have had Hayes going here at some point. This was definitely the one where I had most changes for. But I ended up settling. I think the Hawks should definitely go with Tyrese Halliburton with this pick, which Tyrese Halliburton, for me, is one of my favorite players in this draft. I think he has the potential to be one of the best players in this draft. And I think he has the best value in this draft because he's not expected to go in the top 5. Yet he easily could be a top 5 player when it's all said and done in this draft class. I think he's really he's one of the best there's a lot of good playmaking guards in this draft. He's definitely near the top in that. He's not as flashy as LaMelo. He won't be doing behind the back or like some Harlem Globetrotters things, but he gets it done. He gets it from point A to point B very effectively. I think taking the load off Trae Young's shoulders would be a huge help. Putting Tyrese at the shooting guard. They do have Kevin Huerter, who is a solid starter for them, but it doesn't hurt to add Halliburton, see who the better player is, and then have better bench depth with young players who can do whatever for the Hawks. But I think Tyrese works really well for this team because offensively he helps Trae Young, but also he's one of the better defenders in this draft, especially off-ball defense, defending the perimeter. This Hawks team was atrocious defensively and was a really big reason why they were one of the worst teams in the league. And a big reason for that was the center position, which they have fixed with Clint Capella. That trade, he will anchor that defense, and they will not be towards the bottom of the league in that right, especially if they do get Halliburton as well, another great defender for this team. Because looking at the Hawks, their main need is defense. Offensively, they're really set with Trae Young, especially him and John Collins feed pretty well offensively. It's defense that they have issues with. Again, the defense is the main point for the Hawks in this draft. Halliburton's a great defender, not to mention a great three-point shooter. As I mentioned, a great playmaker. So he just adds it on both ends. He's one of the best talents in this draft. Maybe he doesn't fit perfectly with the Hawks because they have Cam Reddish as well, who they could put at the 2, who they just drafted. As you mentioned, Hunter, they just drafted him. Can't really give up on him just yet. So there's most of this team, they have players where they aren't movable, but if you're the Hawks, just go with the best player available, and I think that's Halliburton for them.
Yeah, and I consider going Tyrese Halliburton as well in this spot. I think it's definitely, or even Killian Hayes, both guys extremely talented. Moving ahead to the Detroit Pistons, who have kind of been in this realm of non-relevancy for a while. Like they every now and then they get the 8th seed and then they miss the playoffs, and they're really, who knows what the directions. There's been a lot of rumors of them possibly trading Blake Griffin to who or to where and for whom, I don't know. But I personally don't think the Pistons should. So Ryan, who do you think? I'm going to go back to you and you start. Who do you think the Pistons take?
I think so. First, before I say this, I think this is the top team to try to trade for the first pick, because I think LaMelo on this team would be amazing for them.
Oh,
they, as you said, they're mediocre. They need a star. They need a flashy player to get fans interested. They need someone to run this offense. They just need a very talented player. Obviously, all teams do.
The Pistons haven't had a star.
Yeah.
In our basketball watching lifetime, I don't think.
I can't, like Blake Griffin, you could say, and now
I wouldn't even count
the
that
back end of his career. Yeah,
Andre Drummond, not really.
Yeah,
it wasn't ever since Chauncey Billups and that 04 championship team has been broken up. But I'll let you finish.
Devoid a star, so I think they should try to trade for LaMelo. But if they stay packed at 7th pick, I think Killian Hayes is just maybe a worse version of LaMelo. I mean, he is a great playmaker. Again, most guards in this class are very good playmakers. The biggest issue for him is he doesn't have great bursts. He's kind of undersized, and he struggles finishing in the paint because he's a left-hand dominant. Very similar to my man, RJ Barrett. He only drives with his left hand, which is why some mock drafts have had him going to the Knicks, Killian Hayes, that is. But with him and RJ Barrett only being left-hand dominant, that would
that'd be horrible.
I don't think that's a good fit. I think Killian Hayes with the Pistons, though, he takes over for Derrick Rose, who they most likely will end up trying to trade for because him and Blake Griffin have no business being on this roster. This is a complete dumpster fire rebuilding roster. Stars like that should not, or past stars, I should say, should not be on that team. But anyways, Killian Hayes, I think, could be the star that they are missing. He'll lead the offense at the point guard position, and he's shown some promise as an off-ball defender as well. He's got pretty good size too, 6'5", 6'8" wingspan, good for a point guard. So I like Killian Hayes. I think he's a good fit for them if they don't try to trade up for LaMelo.
Yeah, and I think the Pistons, they will most likely make a deal somewhat tonight, whether it be moving picks or trading Blake Griffin. Those are the one or two things. Or trading Derrick Rose. There have been rumors of Derrick Rose possibly being traded to the Lakers, which I don't know if that's going to happen as much now that they've traded for Dennis Schroeder. Yeah. But I have the Pistons filling their point guard needs as well, not going Killian Hayes, since I still have Tyrese Halliburton on my board. I'm going to have him go to Detroit. You mentioned him a little bit earlier at the Cavs, but Halliburton, good size as a point guard, 6'5". He's been told he needs to add some muscle, given the fact he only weighs 175. And given the fact LaMelo Ball is 6'7", weighs 190, people say that he needs to put on muscle. So I think both of these guys are very similar. Outside of ball, I think he is the most creative player with the basketball in this class. Halliburton is. He also has a really high basketball IQ, can get it done defensively, and has very solid body control as well, driving to the rim. I think that'll be a nice factor. I think he and Blake Griffin could be a nice 1-2 combo if Blake Griffin stays. And the one other thing is he does have an unconventional jump shot, but he still knocks him down at a relatively decent clip, 43% from 3, 78% from the line, and is only going to get better. So I think Tyrese Halliburton could be the point guard of the future here. But I'm going to be completely honest. I think Halliburton, Killian Hayes, these 2 point guards, I don't think either of these guys are going to have amazing NBA careers. I hope they prove me wrong, but I'm not so high on them where I'd be like, oh God, this is the guy I want to build around for the future. I think Halliburton, Hayes will be 2 guys where teams complement their stars in the future, whichever team takes them.
Yeah, I definitely see that with Hayes. I think I have a little more confidence in Halliburton. Just the way his size to me, also just his frame and the way he moves offensively kind of reminds me of Jason Tatum-ish. Like he has the size with that. He uses hesitations a lot, which is obviously one of the main moves for Jason Tatum. I'm not trying to compare him to Jason Tatum. I'm just saying he reminds me a little bit of that. I think he has a little more potential. But again, who knows if he'll be a real star in this draft. He could just be a solid player, a solid role player. Who knows?
He very likely could. Moving ahead to the team that I know you will have your eyes glued to the entire night. The New York Knickerbockers, who made a trade earlier today to get the 23rd pick. Who knows what their intentions are with that. Ryan, I'm going to go first here just so I can let you rant for as long as possible. I have the Knicks taking Obi Toppin. I think best player available at this point. He was obviously a projected top 4 pick at one point. Reigning NCAA Player of the Year, great athleticism, very versatile as an offensive player. He probably could play a small ball center, which could work in the Knicks' favor. And you have RJ Barrett already as the young piece for the Knicks. Obi Toppin could be his co-star for the future. I think it would be great. There have been rumors of the Knicks possibly trading up or trading for Russell Westbrook as well in Houston. I don't think they should do that. Just get one more star athlete in Obi Toppin, pair him with RJ Barrett. But I'll let you go on your Knicks rant because I can't wait to hear this.
So I actually kind of like that pick in Obi Toppin. I don't have the Knicks picking him here, but if they end up picking him on draft night, I'd be fine with it. Your analysis makes it make sense as well. And also with Tom Thibodeau as the coach now, Obi Toppin's main weakness is defense. If Thibodeau can mold him and teach him how to play good defense, he's got the size, the athleticism to be a good defender. Now he just needs to learn how to play defense, and who better to teach him than Tom Thibodeau. So I like Obi Toppin, as you said, but I think what the Knicks should do is draft Devin Vassell, wing out of Florida State, because he is the definition of a 3-and-D player, which is so important in today's league. And sure, that might mean he doesn't have the best upside. We've seen 3-and-D players like DeAndre Hunter, who we mentioned earlier in this draft. He was a 3-and-D type of guy, and he didn't have the best year last year. So maybe in terms of potential, it's not as much. But in terms of the needs of the New York Knicks, a wing who can defend and shoot the three is exactly what this team needs. And Devin Vassell has proven that he gets better and better as he goes along. He wasn't even a top 200 recruit coming into college, was nowhere near drafting when he was a freshman in Florida State. Then his sophomore year, he's potentially top 10 pick. And he just keeps getting better and better as he progresses. Shot 41% from three in college. So I really like what he has to offer. Sure, the upside might not be there as much, but in terms of a wing player who can just fit perfectly in today's NBA, I think Devin Vassell works. But also, I would be very open to Obi Toppin as well. There's a couple ways the Knicks can go here. If Halliburton's still available, I would love for them to pick him. But with my board as it is, I think Vassell's the way to go.
Very interesting indeed. Before we move on to the next team in the Washington Wizards, I want to get your opinion, Ryan. What do you want the Knicks to do tonight? Do you want them to keep their pick at 8 and take the best player available, whoever it is, whether it be Vassell or Toppin, whoever? Do you want them to trade up to get into the top 4 or whatever it is to get one of those top guys? Or do you want them to trade the pick entirely and get a superstar like a Russell Westbrook or a John Wall or whoever? What do you want? Because I'm very curious.
I'm pretty intrigued at the possibility of getting LaMelo Ball. I think he really can be the best player in this draft. It's just a lot of it has to do with his attitude and just his play style right now. As we know, he had a very cherry picking a lot in his time at Chino Hills. He's that kind of offense is just not going to work in the NBA. So I think I'm not exactly too high on him. I think instead the Knicks should just keep their picks that they have. Just stockpile as much young talent as you can, especially in an uncertain draft like this. I mean, we didn't see any of these people play in the NCAA tournament. There have not been many pre-draft workouts or anything like that. So there's a lot of uncertainty in this draft. So I don't think it's really necessary to be aggressive and trade up into a top 3 pick and then give up all the picks you had just for one guy. I don't think that really makes sense. You already gave up 2 picks to move up to 23. I think you just stay pat there. There's definitely some guys that you could get at 23, like a Cole Anthony or RJ Hampton, something like that, where that's pretty good value.
Elijah Hughes.
Well, that'd be a reach. But, I mean, I would actually be fine with that because go Q's. But, yeah, I think it'd be smart to just pick at 8 and 23. Maybe try to make a trade after you make those picks, but not before, and definitely do not trade for Russell Westbrook.
Do not trade for Russell Westbrook. Okay.
Because you could either trade up and get LaMelo, but don't trade and get Russell Westbrook. That makes no sense to me at all. I really hope they don't do that. And that's a very Knicks move, so I'm pretty nervous.
I guess we'll see. You got about 8 more hours or so until the Knicks are on the clock, I would say, more or less. Shifting ahead to the number 9 overall pick. Man, time flies when you're having fun. The Washington Wizards, they took Rui Hachimura in this spot last year. Very solid young player out of Japan. John Wall is coming back. Bradley Beal. Who knows what his future is with the team? Ryan, who do you think the Wizards take here?
So offensively, this was one of the better teams in the league, but defensively, this was by far one of the worst teams in the league. So again, defense is the mainstay here. Also, you have John Wall coming back with Bradley Beal. No need to look at the backcourt. And anyways, if you're the Wizards, you go for best player available anyway. That being said, though, I think they go Isaac Okoro here. I think a wing defender like that with Troy Brown could be one of the better wing defender pairings in the league. I really like that prospect for them, especially because as you said, they've drafted Rui already. I was thinking maybe they could go Obi Toppin, but Rui and Obi Toppin would be a little bit redundant. And also he doesn't help defensively at all. So I think Okoro makes sense for them. He doesn't have much upside because he's not a good shooter. He had very low free throw percentage and just doesn't have great mechanics. Is pretty limited offensively. He could drive and finish pretty well. But aside from that, it's really just defense for him. But boy, is he a great defender. On and off ball, switching on rotation, just guarding the perimeter. Anything you want defensively, he can provide it, which is exactly what the Wizards need, especially because they can make a playoff run this year easily. With John Wall and Bradley Beal back in a weak Eastern Conference, you get a strong defender like this. Hopefully Rui develops even more next year, and this could easily be a playoff team. So getting someone who could shore up the defense, fill in a wing position that they could need as well, because aside from Troy Brown, they're not very deep at the wing position. I think Okoro is the way to go for the Wizards.
Yeah, and I had Okoro going to Atlanta, right? Yeah, I had him going to Atlanta. Sorry, I was reading something else. And so the Wizards can get him. I think that'd be a great steal. You mentioned, though, that maybe the backcourt is not a need for this team. I actually kind of think they do. I think they take Killian Hayes here, the point guard out of France. And although John Wall is expected to come back, I don't think he's going to be the all-star caliber player that he was right away. He's looking good in these YouTube video scrimmages that he's had, but he's coming off a massive lower leg injury, Achilles, foot. It was a whole thing, multiple injuries compounding on one another. Who knows what his health is? And John Wall he's got a loaded contract. He's going to get paid a lot of money in the next few years, and he's only getting older. I think the Wizards do try to move on from him. Maybe not this year, but maybe after next year. So I think they need a point guard for the future to pair with Rui Hachimura, last year's first-round pick, and I think Hayes could definitely do that. My one concern is I have two concerns with Hayes. One, his athleticism, not the most athletic for a point guard, although he is 6'5" and 192 pounds. And also he turned the ball over 25% of his possessions. That definitely has to get cleaned up. I think he'll get great learning experience behind John Wall and Bradley Beal, at least for the time being. But I think it is time. Sorry, I'm fixing this headphone here. I think it's time for the Wizards to maybe someone hit the reset button, move on from John Wall, move on from Bradley Beal. There have been rumors of Bradley Beal to Brooklyn, John Wall. I heard a rumor the other day that they would swap him for Russell Westbrook, which I think would be a horrible idea. But who knows? It doesn't make sense at all. But who knows with this NBA? I think the Wizards, however, I think they need to tell their fans, be patient. We're going to work this out. We kind of hit a rough patch with our stars and John Wall and Bradley Beal. We're going to reset, and hopefully we'll be back in 2025 at the earliest.
At first I wasn't very high on when you said Killian Hayes going to the Wizards, but as you kept talking, you kept convincing me. And I actually think
what can I say?
Especially because on your draft board, Okoro wouldn't have even been available. So that wouldn't have been an option. And if that's the case, then Hayes would actually be a great pick at number 9 for the Wizards, because on some draft boards, I've seen Killian Hayes go number 1. Like he has the potential.
Never going to happen, by the way.
It's not going to happen, but he has the potential to be a very good player. And it's because of everything except his driving to the rim, which I think he should just take out of his game in general. Not only is he one-hand dominant and it's left hand, which is not great, but he just doesn't have great bounce. And he's not the strongest guy, like you said, not most athletic to finish at the rim. I think if he just focuses on playmaking, his shot is pretty much there, and he could just develop on the bench unit for the Wizards for a year or two until they try to find a way to move John Wall out of there, get rid of that contract, and then put Killian Hayes at the starting point guard position. I think that works perfectly for them because he's only 18 as well. Right. He shouldn't be thrusted in. Like, if he ends up getting drafted by the Pistons and they thrust him into the starting point guard role, he might have a bad rookie year because he's 18. This is a bad team, and he's just not fully ready and developed yet. So having him be on a team where he could get mentored under John Wall for a year or two maybe, I like that a lot. So that's a very good pick by you. That wasn't expected. So kudos.
Yeah, I'm good for one good pick every 3 months. So And the other thing is the Wizards too. They have Hachimura. They have Thomas Bryant, who showed signs of being a really solid big man during their time in the bubble. So I think the Wizards, they're starting to build a young core here. So why not go for it? And they also have Scott Brooks as their head coach, who, mind you, was the brains behind this Thunder's dynasty that we saw early in the 2010s with Russell Westbrook, James Harden, and Kevin Durant. So who knows? Maybe he could draw something up here that could really help develop Killian Hayes or whoever the Wizards take. Moving on to the final pick in this mock draft, the team that has been in the news a lot in the last few days in the NBA, and really ever since the bubble, the Phoenix Suns. They went undefeated in the NBA's bubble down in Orlando. And then on Monday, they make a big move to secure their roster, hoping to make a playoff push in 2021, trading for Chris Paul, who is on exile in the NBA somewhat. First, let's not go too crazy into the trade because we're going to talk more about it in a later episode of the Chips podcast. But Ryan, did you like the trade?
For CP3, I absolutely loved it. And like you said, ever since the bubble, man, aside from the Lakers, this might be the hottest team since coronavirus came out because
aptly named bubble, the Suns.
In the
hottest team.
Yeah, no pun intended. But
all intended.
In the bubble, went undefeated and almost got in the playoffs after being the 13th seed entering the bubble. So that was great for them. And then they turn around and make I think a great trade for CP3, only giving up Kelly Oubre and some picks, and in return getting someone who will facilitate this offense, take the load off Devin Booker a little bit, will help DeAndre Ayton's game develop so much because, boy, will a point guard who could just be the floor general and make your job easier be so good for someone like DeAndre Ayton, who he's been developing. He looks like he'd be a good player in this league, but he's just not there yet. But having someone like CP3 there to help DeAndre Ayton, the way that CP3 has helped DeAndre Jordan in the past, the way that he helped Steven Adams this year, he just helps every center he's with. So DeAndre Ayton is going to only get better from this. Devin Booker is not going to be double teamed and not going to have to score every single possession now. I love this move that the Suns made. And I think the draft pick that would make the most sense with this new trade is Obi Toppin, who I still have available, going to number 10 with the Suns, because having someone like Obi Toppin, who's a great three-point shooter, who's athletic, who also can create offense for the Suns team is huge. And I think he somewhat resembles Kelly Oubre in that way. He created his own offense, decent shooter, pretty athletic, finishing at the rim. And he fit multiple positions as well. Obi Toppin, because of his size, he's listed as a big. He can easily be moved to the 3 or 4, especially on the Suns team. They'll have DeAndre Ayton at the big position. Putting Obi Toppin at the 3 or the 4 can be very big for them. And I think this team could be one of the best offensive teams in the league because with CP3 at the helm, facilitating to Devin Booker, Obi Toppin, who can create his own offense. Heck, even Cam Johnson, who they drafted last year, is a great three-point shooter. I love what the Suns are doing right now. They've gotten so much better from where they were just 8 months or so ago. And I think Obi Toppin, for them, he's definitely the best player available at this point.
100%.
He fits their needs, and he will make this team one of the most offensively dangerous teams in the league.
Yeah, and I'll give my quick thoughts on the CP3 trade first. I think it's a great move. The Suns have now gotten back to somewhat of a relevancy that they had with Steve Nash. They were in this level of mediocrity that was abysmal for a long time. Devin Booker said a couple of years ago that I'm done missing the playoffs. I think now with CP3, the Suns can actually do that. Mm-hmm. Obi Toppin's a good pick. He's been off my board for a couple of picks now, having him go to the Knicks. But if the Suns get him, holy cow, a top 4 caliber talent of a player, getting all the way them down at 10. I have them going, however, with RJ Hampton out of New Zealand. And I had this pick penciled in prior to the CP3 trade, but I think it still works with the CP3 trade. Although Hampton is a guard, the Suns had this awesome run in the bubble. I think they could still, Hampton could be a good backup point guard for the Suns behind Paul, getting to learn, similar to how Shai Gilgeous-Alexander got to learn behind CP3 in Oklahoma City. And then once Paul moves on from Phoenix or moves on from, it starts, what's the word? God. It's no longer what he is. We'll say that. RJ Hampton can step in and fill the role nicely. He's not going to be needed to be a starter right away, but given his explosiveness and versatility on the offensive end, he could really be a nice spark off the bench, and I think he'd be a nice building piece for the Suns in the post-Chris Paul days now.
So, like, that's pretty similar to the pick you just made, having a point guard sit behind a seasoned veteran like that until his expired contract either gets moved or he ends up just playing somewhere else, and just having someone like a Killian Hayes or an RJ Hampton sit in the backcourt like that. I think that's a great idea. But just going back to my Obi Toppin pick real quick before we end this, I think this also could be great for the Suns because I think he could fall down draft boards a bit because he's really old in draft terms. He's 22 already, so that's pretty old for some teams. Like teams like the Knicks might look at that and be like, way too old, don't take him. So if that is the case and he ends up falling to the Suns, I think he's great because he's fully developed, and not fully developed, but he's way more developed than a bunch of these guys in this draft who are 18-year-olds, still pretty raw. He's who he is. He'll get better on the NBA level, hopefully, if he can progress more. But they know what they're getting in Obi Toppin. They have Mikal Bridges, who they drafted a couple years ago. He was pretty old for his age. And Cam Johnson last year was 23 as a rookie. So they have older again. They're in their mid-20s. They're not old.
They're just older than us.
Yeah, they're older than us. So I guess they're old. But wing defenders who are experienced, they know their roles, and they're pretty much all great three-point shooters in their own rights. I think Obi Toppin would be the steal of the draft if he ends up falling to the Suns. Then again, though, he can end up going fourth to the Bulls. I mean, I think Obi Toppin has the most range in his draft picks because he can go from 4 or he can end in the lottery. I mean, Obi Toppin is one of the more interesting parts of this draft that people should definitely pay attention to.
100% agree. Before we close things out, part of what makes draft night so special are the trades. So, Ryan, I'm going to throw out a couple names here, and you tell me who you think is most likely to get traded or a couple guys who you think is most likely to get traded. These are guys who have been rumored to be on the move, and you got Bradley Beal, Blake Griffin, Zach LaVine. He's been coming up into rumors as of early this morning. Ben Simmons, Russell Westbrook, and there's one more guy. Shoot. You know, we'll just leave it at 5.
Kevin Love, maybe?
Not Kevin Love. He's in the room. Oh, Gordon Hayward. That's who it was.
Oh, yes.
Gordon Hayward. So out of those 6 guys, Westbrook, Beal, LaVine, Simmons, Griffin, and Hayward, who's most likely to get moved, and where do you think they would go?
I was originally going to say Westbrook, and I think he definitely could get moved. Maybe not tonight, but in the next coming days. The Rockets said they're not in a rush to trade him or Harden. I don't even know if they will trade Harden. I think they'll definitely try to trade Westbrook. I don't really think they ever wanted him on their team. They just wanted to get rid of Chris Paul, but they got Westbrook back, and he's got an equally bad contract. So they'll definitely try to move him. I think the Hornets, they're definitely interested in him because of that Michael Jordan connection, but also just to have a star on that team, just to be relevant, just so he can have a similar role that he had with the Thunder, where he can just control everything. This is his team. It's like a playground. He can just do whatever he wants, free roam. So I think Westbrook will ended up getting traded. But on draft night, I think Gordon Hayward, who I forgot about, but you mentioned him, I think will definitely get moved because the Celtics, they've been talking about trying to get into the top 10. I think they definitely have interest in getting Wiseman or Okongwu. They definitely need a big. That's really their one missing piece as well, kind of like the Warriors. That 5 position has not been the strongest in the past years. So for them to draft someone like that would be huge, which is why I think they try to trade Gordon Hayward and some picks with the Hawks. So they give Gordon Hayward to the Hawks, and then they get the 6th pick where they could draft Okongwu who's available or whoever they want. But also I think that's a pretty good move for the Hawks as well because, like we said, like they don't really need this draft pick. They pretty much have their core kind of set up. But to put instead a wing like Gordon Hayward in instead of Cam Reddish or DeAndre Hunter, that's such an upgrade for the Hawks, especially because they're trying to make a playoff push. They want to make Trae Young happy because they want to keep him for the long term. They don't want to keep missing playoffs like the Suns do, where Devin Booker gets frustrated and he's like, I'm not missing playoffs anymore. Luckily for the Suns, they've turned it around and have made him a little more happy. I think the Hawks need to focus on doing that now. Make sure Trae Young doesn't get frustrated with all this losing. Get win now moves like Gordon Hayward. They did that with Clint Capella in last season during the trade deadline. So they're making playoff moves. If they're trying to trade out of this pick and Gordon Hayward's available, I think that definitely happens, especially because the Celtics have expressed interest in moving to the top of the draft.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Gordon Hayward most likely as well. And one other note, yesterday, the Hayward and the Celtics agreed to push the deadline for Hayward's $34 million player option for this upcoming season from 5 p.m. yesterday to 3 p.m. Thursday. So something tells me a trade might be happening where Hayward gets moving. I think Atlanta is the perfect spot. Boston has 3 picks in the first round. I don't think it will take all 3 picks plus Hayward for the Celtics to move all the way up to number 6? Or number 5, whatever it is. Yeah, number 6 with Atlanta. But I think it'd be Hayward in one of those picks, maybe the first one in 14, or maybe the second one later in the teens of the draft. Hayward is definitely most likely going to get moved tonight. And I like that Russell Westbrook pick as well. I think the Bulls are going to hold on to Zach LaVine. I think he's a nice young piece. He's their quote unquote star as of right now. I think the Wizards, they want to try out Bradley Beal and John Wall again before they ship him off to most likely Brooklyn. That's been the rumor.
Also, I know the Wizards GM has gotten a lot of calls about trying to trade Bradley Beal, and as I've seen on the internet, he has had no interest in trying to trade Bradley Beal, because Bradley Beal has been on trade talks for like 2 years now. So many teams want him because he could be the missing piece for a championship type team. Like if the Heat could get him, or the Warriors could maybe look to trade the second pick to try to get Bradley Beal.
Lakers as well.
They would love the Lakers. All these teams would love Bradley Beal, but it doesn't seem like the Wizards want to give him up just yet. I think they want to wait for John Wall to get back, see what those two can do again, especially with how much Bradley Beal has grown in the absence of John Wall. Sure, John Wall might not be the same person when he comes back, but hey, maybe they'll get a Killian Hayes so he doesn't have to be, so they can have a point guard for the future, take his role later on. So the Wizards, a lot of teams want Bradley Beal. It doesn't seem like they'll end up trading him though, whereas Gordon Hayward, it looks like, especially that detail of him moving his option to tomorrow, that's very fishy.
It's very fishy.
I don't know if he's staying on that team much longer.
No, not at all. And it sucks for Gordon Hayward because he was a big name free agent, signed with the Celtics, and then hurt himself within the first couple minutes of his first game in Cleveland with that leg injury, and just hasn't been the same since. So I think he needs to hit the reset button. But that concludes this episode of the Chips Podcast. Unless, Ryan, you have any other final thoughts heading into draft night, only about 5.5 hours away.
Well, just one quick thing I was going to say. Also, part of that Hayward deal that was pretty upsetting is he was reunited with Brad Stevens, too. They both were at Butler during their collegiate days. And then having them reunite with the Celtics, they thought that would be a huge move for them, especially that's when they had Kyrie. Gordon Hayward's stint with the Celtics has never really been that great. And also, they don't really need him because they have Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum at the wing positions already. I think they definitely move Hayward. And I'm pretty interested to see what other moves they are, because that's definitely not going to be the only one.
Kemba Walker as well has been rumored.
Oh, really? I wasn't aware.
I heard a rumor too, but that might have been before the Bucks traded for Drew Holiday, which we'll talk about in a later episode.
But yeah, so I'm also the Timberwolves pick as well. I'm very, very interested. Obviously, it's the number 1 pick. It's the headline of the draft. But I'm interested to see who's going to try to trade up. Will they end up trading? Who will they pick if they end up just keeping the player? This should be a very interesting draft because there's a lot of uncertainty, which I like, because last year, the top 3 picks, everyone pretty much knew. And sure, this year, most people know the 3 players who will be drafted, top 3. They don't know the order, and then no one knows what else is going to happen afterwards. Right. So this should be a very entertaining draft. And I look forward to talking to it after as well, with trades as well. I mean, the NBA is so busy right now. They have we just had a finals winner. Now it's NBA draft, and then trade started Monday, and free agency starts in a couple days, and then training camp starts at the end of the month in December. So a lot of movement in the NBA. So it should be a fun and exciting couple months.
To quote Terrell Owens, get your popcorn ready. I think that's the perfect place to put the pin in it. Enjoy the draft tonight, Ryan. I know you are in quarantine. You could still watch it and have a great time. Hopefully, next episode, Ryan and I will be breaking down maybe some big storylines from the draft and also a lot of the trades that have happened in recent NBA days, with free agency just around the corner. Not a big free agency class, so expect a lot of trades. Thank you all so much for watching. For Ryan Amick, I'm Tyler Melito. This has been the Chips Podcast, and we'll see you next time.